Grown-up conversation with people who know their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. I'm joined now by Kate Jennings. She's Director of Policy at Logistics UK, standing up for and representing all supply chain logistics with members from road, rail, sea and air industries. Richard Bartlett, a supply chain expert at Klear Now, advises on how to simplify complicated global supply chain logistics. Two extremely knowledgeable people, as indeed is Helen Thomas, as ever, here in the studio, CEO at Blonde Money, friend of the show. Let's start with you, Kate. Your members must be really concerned that Britain's biggest container port has closed down for at least 8 days, with possibly more to come.
Hi, good afternoon, Liam. Good to be talking to you. I suppose the first thing to say is that the supply chain is extremely dynamic and resilient. So they will have planned for this. They will have brought, some deliveries forward. They may have pushed some back. So I'm optimistic that actually, for these 8 days, the manufacturers and consumers shouldn't see the difference. It's all about communication, really, isn't it? As long as the port communicates with the hauliers and the shippers, then the supply chain will respond appropriately.
How concerned are you, Richard Bartlett? Clearly, this strike was well flagged. We knew it was coming. Clearly, Southampton is there. Other British ports that are well capable of taking up the slack for now. But if it is for now...
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to see you again, Liam. Yeah, I mean, it's not that simple just to move ports, as we know, when the large container ships are coming in. Like we've said, we are robust. They will work on this. But you've also got to consider the hauliers that are used to doing the runs, who are going in to collect the containers and deliver them. They lose a huge income. They can't just adjust and change around, particularly if they're in that area. So it has a huge effect just on them, not just the consumer, but also, the hauliers in general, who always seem to be hit at every angle. Fuel, as we've seen this year, obviously we've seen inflation going higher and higher, but it has a huge effect. Them 8 days can have a big effect on the haulage industry, who are used to doing that domestic haulage. And what I mean by that, they will collect the container from Felixstowe, from the port, and deliver it to the customer. Now, hopefully that will carry on at a small way, but as the amount of containers that are coming in, it's a big speed. So yeah, we're going to see some disruption, not a huge disruption, but the worry is if this continues and continues and continues, we've got Christmas coming up, we've got lots of things to look forward to, hopefully, but obviously we're getting port delays and, people are starting to bring the containers in now. We've already had the delays in China and everywhere else. The last thing we need really, Liam, is more delays with containers and particular strikes.
Kate Jennings, let's go back to you. In the end, if it is 8 days, my impression, I've been a business journalist for longer than I care to admit, the UK supply chain is pretty robust. People like you, people like Richard Bartlett, you really know what you're doing. We're good at this stuff. On the other hand, if this strike does go beyond 8 days, if other dock workers do come out in sympathy, that's by no means beyond the realms of possibility. Surely then firms trying to get hold of components will suffer. Shoppers trying to get hold of goods will suffer in terms of both unavailability and price.
I suppose the third thing to say really is that, let's hope the unions and the employer, keep negotiating, keep talking, because the obvious, best thing to happen here is that they reach agreement and there's no further disruption. That's what we're all hoping for, isn't it? But there is, I think, as you've seen...
You are very much an industry insider. This stuff's all over. It's very much under your fingernails. You talk to... you are the umbrella group for so many different companies working in this sector. What is the mood among your members? Is Unite going to limit this to 8 days? Because they're not showing any signs of it so far.
I would say the mood amongst members is, obviously they're feeling the inflationary costs, and that's why, for example, we've asked for a reduction in fuel duty. We've asked for a further 6 pence, maybe linked to the inflation and VAT revenues. So we're trying to be practical here. We're trying to say, you've got to watch those haulier costs, and government has a role to play in managing those costs. When it comes down to a strike like this, I think we need to leave it to the employer and the unions, don't we, to do that negotiation. The industry will respond as best it can. What you hear in the industry is, I think now we've got a much more sort of just-in-case model rather than a just-in-time model. There's quite a lot of stock in the supply chain. So hopefully, we won't have any problems.
Richard, let me put this to you. I said in my opening remarks, I pointed out that Felixstowe is now only the 9th biggest port in Europe. I think Southampton is the 14th. None of them are in the top 50. Yes, they're important to us, but the UK is mostly a services economy these days. We don't really trade much in physical goods. Can't we see this out? Isn't it true that Unite, the dockers, have a lot less leverage now than they would have, say, 30 or 50 years ago?
Well, yeah, 1989 is a long time ago. Obviously, but there's still containers coming in, Liam. Let's not underestimate the value and the value of what the workers actually do at Felixstowe. Let's be clear that Felixstowe is a very, very busy port. We've been on the show, Liam, talking about the delays there. What worries me is we're running up to Christmas. And, we have more and more delays coming in, there are more strikes. That has an effect on your Christmas trade coming in, because obviously the containers are due in. It has effects on the poor hauliers who are waiting, relying on that work. They've had a tough year. They've had the pandemic. They've got the fuel rise, the fuel cost rises. There's a lot of things against them. And then ultimately the consumer wants to be able to see things on the shelves, and hopefully we'll never get to that. But we have to start planning. Government has to look at this, because we cannot afford discontent of the next few months where Unite, or whichever unit is, and again, it's nothing to do with me, that side. I understand obviously why and for the reasons they're doing, but we cannot let this get out of order, because ultimately the consumer is always the person who suffers, and the hauliers are the persons who suffer. And that's key. So we've got to make sure that supply chain is working the best it can. It's supporting the logistics industry, which is very key to the UK economy. And it's also supporting the consumers, that they can buy the product, for the manufacturers, for the importers who are relying on a busy Christmas this year after a very struggling 2 years of the pandemic. So let's be very clear here. We cannot afford more strikes.
Helen Thomas, coming to you in the studio. We've heard there from two, really, supply chain insiders. This is what they do. As an economist, just pulling out slightly, what do you make of the danger that this poses to the British economy?
Well, it is potentially quite dangerous, but then, gosh, we've had so many supply chain problems, haven't we? So in a funny sort of way, we've been rolling with these punches for a long time, but the economy, to extend that metaphor, is a bit bruised and battered from it. And so, yes, while there is flexibility, and we've heard about the response, the just-in-case rather than just-in-time, there is a cost to that in the end. And as we've just heard there, it will likely end up falling on the consumer. And do you know what? As I was listening to that, the only thing I could think, which is, they say economics is a gloomy science, I fear the consumer's already retrenching and won't be buying that much. So we may actually see that the demand side comes down, even as supply is. So from a pure economics perspective, that'll balance out.
I tell you what, we're just going to go to the break. It may be that hearing this news, consumers do a little bit of early Christmas shopping, but then if this has a knock-on effect and prices go up, it may be a bit more of a frugal Christmas.
Yes, well, which was on the cards for so many reasons already, as we know.